Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into the 401 Conversations podcast, your now long-running 401 Conversation podcast. I'm Mike Mneeley, the owner and investment consultant over here at Equity 401k Consultants, and I am joined again by my partner in crime, Mr. Thad Letzer from Nova 401k Associates. Thad, how we doing on this Friday afternoon?
Friday before the 4th, not too bad.
I know we all get this weird holiday dropping in on a Tuesday. Do you get the Monday? I think most people are taking it off though.
Dude, we don't. We're open, but I reckon it's gonna be pretty slow on Monday, anyways, because most people, it seems like, are gonna be out.
One would hope, but I've got plans and implementation, so I'm sure I'll be doing something on a Monday before the holiday begins. On
No rest for the wicked.
Tuesday. Yeah, right. No rest. Well, with that being said, we're going to jump into a hefty topic today. We're going to cover a couple of the provisions that are going to be going live here soon enough from the Secure 2.0 regulation that was passed, and kind of bring you guys up to speed on some things and kind of talk about how it's going to affect plans going forward. And for some of you, it probably won't make too huge of a difference, but some of you, with some of your demographics and knowing how your employees are set up financially and certain things, it may create some work on your end. And then, of course, the other part of that is we're all hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that all the record keepers will be ready when the time comes to implement these changes. So there's a lot out there. And of course, like any other major legislative bill that passes, there's always things that take time, and we're still waiting for guidance from things from the first secure bill that was passed, Secure 1.0, and that was 2019, and 2022 was Secure 2.0. So here we are in the midst of major overhauls legislatively to the retirement plan space for employers. And then, hey, Thad, throwing out something else in there too, of course, is most of the state mandated plan stuff that's going on out there in the world on top of it. So like Cal Savers didn't go away just because all the deadlines passed. There's still companies that are getting in compliance with Cal Savers and having to make the choice between Cal Savers and other types of retirement plans. So I would say there is a lot from a legislative perspective that is going on in our world today when it comes to retirement plans for employees.
Yeah. Hey, dude, Cal Savers has not only not gone away, it's I think effective in 25. It's going to impact everyone down to one employee.
Yeah, correct. I got that email a little while back that's the bigger change that's coming is, if you're an owner-only company, obviously you're still okay. But if you're an owner-only company and you hire an assistant, well, if you're W-2 in that assistant, which I would assume you would be because they're working directly for you, or they're the office staff, you're responsible for them. And in the other part to that is that's if you have 4 employees, right? Because the rule was 5, but now it's 4. So if it's between that 1 and 5. So if you've got 4, you're now going to be dealing with this mandate. So, and that kind of brings up, the important part of this topic and why we're talking about legislation and legislative changes, because, if you're trying to figure out what kind of plan you want to start, it's important for you to know, what you're going to be getting into when you're starting a plan, and understanding what's going to be the better fit. Is Cal Savers the better fit for your company, or is the flexibility in a 401k, does that mean a need, right? And so doing that calculation is going to be incredibly important. And I think for some businesses, they're just going to say, we'll just sign up for Cal Savers, ignoring some of the other benefits that come in from starting a 401k plan or a simple IRA or something of that nature that gives some tax benefits. So we're in the middle of a lot of changes, I guess, is just what I've been trying to kind of get at here as we started this conversation.
Yeah, Mike, I think the takeaway from, already people's heads are probably spinning with all of that alone. It's just, I mean, it's going to benefit the small business owner or any business owner for that matter, to have someone that they can rely on to kind of really consult and talk through all those moving parts. For a business owner to kind of arbitrarily determine just Cal savers or even sponsors that have plans, like there's so much going on. Folks that have plans right now, there's a lot of stuff, man. I mean, they should be sitting down. Hopefully they have an advisor or someone they can speak to about how to make sense of all these moving parts and how so many of these changes are going to change how their plans operate. Plans are designed because an employer has a particular goal and objective in mind with respect to designing a benefit, creating an employee attraction or recruiting tool. And, Secure is really taking some of that control out of their hand in the spirit of creating retirement security for everybody. It is really going to force the hand of a lot of plan sponsors with existing plans to make amendments to their design that, they hadn't ever considered making.
Yeah. There's so much truth to everything that you just said there. And I think, this is where making sure that you have a great service team working with you. Yeah. I like to think of the framework I like to use with my clients is, the 4 pillars of a retirement plan. And that framework's pretty simple, right? It's compliance, service, investments, and education, right? So if you look at your plan from those 4 parts, the 2 that we're talking about a lot right now is compliance and service, right? And making sure that you have a team that's knowledgeable to help you as these changes are going to come about. For example, one of the changes from Secure 2.0 that I believe we've talked about is going to be going live next year is automatic enrollment, right? So
so auto enroll actually goes live in 2025.
2025.
So, folks will have a little more time to kind of get ready for that. But, people were running away from Cal Savers because they didn't like that auto enroll component of Cal Savers. But, it looks like every government, be it state or federal, likes the idea of auto enroll.
Yeah. So it's kind of helpful, I think, to put a background to why that is. Like, it's not just they're not doing this, I think, as an arbitrary thing to force plan sponsors to enroll everything. I think there's a lot of data that backs up why you would want auto enrollment in retirement plans, because you're working against the inertia of human nature, right?
For sure.
So, from a lot of the behavioral finance work that's out there, a lot of the studies show that when you have automatic enrollment, you get participation up and people stay participating. And while they might be a little frustrated at first, once they get in and they realize, hey, this isn't that bad, and they start seeing a nest egg, then, automatic enrollment kind of works out. But needless to say, that's why I was saying at the beginning, the demographics of your company. Right. And you also know the goals and the objectives that you had when you set up the plan.
Right.
So maybe automatic enrollment for your particular situation is going to be more of a nuisance than it is going to be a help to the overall participation in the plan. Because, we know what it's like to live in California, and we know how expensive it is here. And for some of these workers that automatic enrollment is going to be forced upon, from their point of view, they're already living paycheck to paycheck. And now, you're going to force me into a plan where I have to save money with money that I don't have access to, let's say, in an emergency situation where, look, I've got to have access to funds. Saving for retirement would be a dream or a luxury for me, but it's not at this point in time. So I think for those, let's throw that service component in. I say what I put out there to my clients as a best practice is we sit down with the TPA once a year and we review the plan document, right? So number one, that's mainly for compliance purposes, right? Are we making sure that we're following eligibility requirements? Are we making sure that we're following the definition of compensation? Are we making sure that we're not in breach of any of the provisions of our plan document? But the second part to that is if there's amendments that need to be made, or there's legislative things that are going to be coming down from a compliance perspective to say, hey, here's what's coming. Here's what you need to be prepared for. Here's what we can do to support you, but here's what has to happen, right? So in the case of automatic enrollment, you're going to need notices. You're going to have those things sent out to participants. That is an opportunity to maybe have, before the automatic enrollment kicks in, to have a re-enrollment meeting or a meeting with the participants to let them know what their options are ahead of time, so that they don't get stuck in a situation where they end up deferring when they didn't want to defer. Right? So I think there's ways to get ahead of the situation if you have the right service team and the right team working for you to help you manage the operations of the plan.
It's all about communication, right? And it's all about, listen, I mean, you can, as long as you know what's coming, you can plan for it, and you can, integrate some of these changes into, whatever it is that's going to make your plan operate the way you want it to operate. I mean, you make a good point about auto enroll, and it is, behavioral, surprisingly, there's a recent study that even at 10%, the opt-out rate is surprisingly low. I don't have whatever the percentage of but it's like, I was shocked when I heard it, like, and it was it might've been Mercer, like one of the big houses, like there's a big firm that did that study. So, it was a pretty good sized, survey group.
Well, it's like everything else, right? Like you said, communication and making sure that you're getting ahead of these things. Like, I would argue if you're finding out this information from our podcast, you might consider, who's taking care of your
right. Helping you oversee your plan.
Yeah, because we know this plan space, and there are advisors that at times are doing this, as a favor to a client that they have that they're managing for, which is no problem. Or they're doing it, because it's a friend, somebody that's been a long time, buddy that needed the help, and here you are helping them out, and that's all well and good. But at the same time, I think from a fiduciary perspective, or from the plan sponsor's perspective, you already have enough on your plate running your business to deal with the complexities of legislation and ERISA rules that govern your plan, right? I think a lot of companies will opt sometimes to go the Cal Savers way, or like the simple IRA way, because they don't want to deal with the hassle or the headache of navigating the complexities of running a 401k plan. So I think a good rule of thumb here, if you're listening to this here as we get into the third quarter of the year, if you think that you're not up to date on these things, best practice, get on the phone with your TPA, get on the phone with your advisor, get a meeting scheduled, and get up to date on these things. Because
did you even talk about the way you operate your practice, Mike, meeting annually with clients to review plan design and plan document and stuff? I mean, I've been running into a lot of plans recently, not existing Nova clients, but prospective opportunities like that don't have a Roth provision in their plan.
Yeah.
And in 2024, catch-up contributions are required to be made on a Roth basis. So for anyone that's got employees age 50 or over, for any of those employees that make 145K or more, those high earners can only make catch-up contributions, assuming they're age 50 or over, on a Roth basis. So if your plan doesn't have a Roth provision, you've just cut the legs out from that 50-year-old being able to make catch-up contributions.
Right, and you're not compliant. So that's the thing. And, you know, all the plans that we do and we work on, we always make sure there's a Roth component.
Yeah, why wouldn't
I'm
you?
always a fan of flexibility when it comes to these.
Sometimes that's oversight. Other times it's, believe it or not, the sponsor says my employees are going to have a hard enough time understanding how all this works. I don't want to have to talk to them about, do you want to do this pre-tax or after tax? It's going to blow their minds.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I doubt it.
So another shift too is we were talking about this before we went live, long-term part-timers.
Mhm.
So those folks that have been working, 500 hours. So you
For
got
the
10
3
hours.
consecutive years. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Starting in 2021 was the beginning of the measurement period.
So next
So-
year, you
Right.
got to give them eligibility.
You have to give those folks that have worked 500 hours over the consecutive 3 years, starting in 2021. Even if your plan has a 1,000-hour requirement, if they've only got 500 hours, if they met the 500 hours, you gotta let them come into the plan from a deferral standpoint. You don't have to provide any employer contributions if they haven't met the 1,000 hours, but you do have to let them in for deferral purposes. So, while that's nice because it's going to save employers money on having to now give people matching or profit sharing without meeting the formal eligibility requirements, to the conversation we had earlier, shoot, man, now it's going to have to require the sponsor to start keeping track of all these people that they otherwise weren't, focused on.
Well, and here's a big one. Let's assume that maybe, you're underneath the because the audit rule change is now based by account balances. Let's say that you were under the account balance threshold because you didn't have to give eligibility to the part-timers, but now you give them eligibility to defer, and now they have an account balance in the plan. And now you're into the audit threshold because now you have those part-timers that put you into that into that position. Now you got to pay for an audit too on top. And that
I don't know if those balances are going to get counted towards that audit requirement. I don't know that. I mean, there's so many, I should probably take a look at that. That would be interesting, but I feel like that LTPT rule, it was kind of a pain because, and I don't need to keep track of those people, but it's not going to hurt me on my ADP test. It's not going to hurt me from, needing to make employer contributions. I also don't think it's going to hurt me in the large plan audit perspective. Like the auto enroll.
Let's keep our fingers crossed, right? Because you're right.
I mean, auto enroll is definitely going to do that to me, but.
Well, and I'll throw a shameless plug here. And hopefully next week, when we get a chance to get back together and film again, we will have an auditor
awesome.
on with us to
Cool.
discuss everything 401k audits. So that should be fun.
That sounds like a party.
Yeah. So I
Hey,
think,
dude, I want to take one other quick step back though too about with respect to the long-time part-time issue. It was, hey, you got to track people that have worked 500 hours in the prior 3 years. Effective 2025, that gets cut down to 2 years. So now, if you've had any employees, so think about, a company that hires someone in 2023. If that person worked 500 hours in 23, 500 hours in 24, you got to let them defer in 25.
yeah, and that stuff's going to continue to change, dude.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is, we have mentioned a lot of best practices throughout the podcast that we've done so far, especially when we had the one about fiduciary roles and responsibilities. We talked about best practice. One best practice that I think can help head off, any of these issues is checklists. Use checklists. I have checklists for clients for their audit folder, for keeping a good fiduciary folder. I have checklists for what to, discuss in plan reviews, quarterly reviews and things that you should be checking off throughout the year and going through. And then I've even got a sample Department of Labor audit letter that has a checklist of items they might request. So I'm a huge fan of checklists. And I think, look, if checklists are what pilots use in the aviation industry to make sure they get from point A to point B safely, or for any situation they encounter. Those are life and death situations. This might be, an expensive situation if you have a, issue with the plan, but checklists can certainly help make sure that you are covering the items throughout the year that will help you stay on top of these legislative and compliance changes. So best practice, guys, if you don't have one, feel free to send me an email. I've got a few checklists I'll be happy to send out to anybody listening to this recording. But I think they're great, and I think they work for keeping everything on task and keeping a plan moving forward smoothly.
Good idea.
Well, and I think you guys use it for your onboarding. I mean, there's a checklist set up that you go through, Thad, when you onboard clients, for provisions, checking off the boxes of each provision. It makes it so you guys cover what provisions are important that need to be covered in a plan design session. So
I had a plan design call this morning with an advisor on a small plan, and where a bundled provider might just have all defaults, right? Well, we can do administration for it. It's all really turnkey. And so they design a plan document just with all the defaults in there. Talking to this advisor, he's like, you know what? The three employees in the plan, they're all family. And it's never going to be any other employees other than family. So, with respect to deferral modifications, like rather than doing it semi-annually, like why not do it monthly? Like we designed the plan to be a lot more flexible, because we had the opportunity to consult with the advisor and learn some of the nuances about the plan, so that we designed the plan properly for that particular sponsor. When you go with a bundle provider, you don't get that type of consultation and interaction to end up with the best result.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And we could do a whole nother conversation on, default and boilerplate agreements and why you should be having that plan design consultation, whether you're a startup or you're transitioning, or even every year we're reviewing the plan. Because again, the goals and objectives, maybe you started the plan 10 years ago, everything was as it should have been, but maybe now there's things that have changed. The company's growing, maybe it's time for a design switch. Maybe you go from the old profit sharing setup to new comp, or, other ways of doing things to make it more advantageous for you as the business and for the participants. So yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms we could certainly open, but that we are at the end, my friend, of this week's episode. So guys, as always, we super appreciate you taking the time to listen to us ramble about 401k plans and legislative changes and all those fun things. We do this because, we care about the clients and the people that we serve and the future people that we serve, or even those that we don't serve, because we want you to make sure that you're running a successful plan for your business and for your participants. So if you found this of value, please take the time to subscribe. Please take the time to share it. And also our contact info, as always, will be in the show notes. But again, if you want checklists, I'd be happy to send those to you. And
before we part, I would like to provide some clarification on the long time, part-time and the audit rules.
Sure.
So it looks like the Department of Labor feels that because the change now is auditing plans only based on participant balances. Listen, the long-time, part-time rules are making it so that I now have to allow those people to contribute. So from that standpoint, they're eligible. But if they opt not to, that's still going to be a zero participant balance. So the Department of Labor feels that because although those LTPT folks are eligible, the fact that they don't defer, bottom line is those, if my long-time part-times participate, that is going to propel me towards that audit number of participants with a balance.
For sure. Well, great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
And hopefully when we have our auditor on, we can discuss that part too. So yeah, man, I appreciate you, brother. Have a happy 4th of July. This is probably going to pop out after the 4th. So hopefully everybody has a wonderful 4th of July as well and gets a chance to relax. And we will see you all on the next 401 Conversations.
See ya.